Hi, I'm doing my seminar leadership on an article titled Forever Small, The Strange Case of Ashley X. This article is written by a woman regarding the case of Ashley X, who was a child who had severe physical and developmental disabilities. She had next to no motor skills, and she wasn't able to care for herself in terms of feeding, walking, bathing. Essentially, she could just hold her head up a little high and express minimal emotions. So there are a variety of procedures performed on Ashley with the intent to keep her small. The goal was to keep her at a smaller size so that her parents could care for her at a later age in life. She was kind of displaying signs of early onset puberty, so her parents feared as she aged and grew they wouldn't be able to transport her, she couldn't attend family outings, and perhaps they'd need to put her into a special care facility, which they didn't want to do. So there's a variety of procedures that can be done. The Ashley treatment kind of encompasses several key ones, but they do vary as there's more than one case of this, and not all parents will have the exact same procedures performed on their children. Perhaps the main procedure is hormone injection because it stunts the growth, and that's kind of what's going to keep the child at the same size. Other key ones that were particular to Ashley's case but are found in others, a hysterectomy was performed. This was so that she wouldn't experience pain with menstrual cramps, and also in the event of sexual abuse there would not be any unplanned pregnancies for her. She also had her breast buds removed. This was done for several reasons. Breast cancer was fairly common in her family, and they wanted to avoid that happening with her. Also, the straps of her wheelchair they feared would be uncomfortable if she happened to have large breasts as she grew older. And also, they believed removing them would kind of make her less of a target for sexual predators, for male caregivers, and things like that. So that was done as a safety precaution for her. So as I said, others have done this as well. There's another example of a girl, I believe very similar to Ashley's age, who was born and had shaken baby syndrome and then was put into foster care and later adopted. And around the same age as Ashley, her parents opted on this procedure as well to keep her small. So it has been done a few times. I believe there's about 6 publicized cases of it, but there might be many more because parents might give things like hormonal injections to their children to stunt their growth, but it might very well not be titled the Ashley treatment. So it does happen. It is kind of rare, but there are cases of it kind of all over the world now, actually. So there are ethical arguments for the treatment. This article is clearly against it, but the main ethical argument for the Ashley treatment, which is used by Ashley's parents and the parents of others as long as advocates of it, is that it's in the best interest of the child and will improve their quality of life. So they believe that having the Ashley treatment will allow the child to spend more time with their family. They can do more things with the help of their family that will help them experience higher levels of joy. And also maybe it will be physically easier for them. Perhaps they'll feel less burdened perhaps by a larger body, and they won't have to go through some physical pains of puberty and things like that. There are also a lot of ethical arguments against the Ashley treatment. This article mainly focuses on countering those who advocate it. So she talks about, for example, is it done in the best interest of Ashley? What she means here is that the main argument is that it is done in the child's best interest. However, the parents really are the ones benefiting from this in the sense that their lives are made easier by easier transportation of their child. They don't perhaps have to invest in larger wheelchairs. They can carry her easier. They can lift her easier. But it's not essentially making Ashley's life any easier, especially because she can't really voice emotions such as pain or discomfort. So they really have no way of knowing whether or not it's helping at all. Another issue in regards to her not being able to vocalize anything, she can't give consent for it. So usually procedures are only performed without consent in life or death situations. For example, if there's a car accident and someone's unconscious but they need emergency surgery, something might be performed without the consent of the patient as it's deemed life-saving. In Ashley's case, none of these procedures are supposed to be life-saving, and that doesn't really imply that they'll prolong life. So the argument is that because consent can't be given, none of these procedures should be performed, as they're not necessarily going to even improve her quality of life and certainly not save her life. Another thing, parents argue for the removal of sex organs, and that is to reduce the risk of sexual assault. For example, the removal of the breasts. Now, the argument against this, which I tend to agree with, is if someone is going to act upon an urge and assault someone with a special need, such as Ashley or other children like her, I don't believe the physical aspect of having breasts present would sway that decision. I think at the point where you're making the decision to make that act against someone with such a severe disability, I think once you've gone that far, I don't believe the removal of breasts would prohibit you from acting upon it at that point. So I don't think it's really going to determine whether or not that will happen to Ashley. Another issue is if it's just about making it more convenient for the parents so that they can transport her easier by making her lighter. They argue why stunting of the growth, and perhaps why not just the removal of the limbs. So I believe the author's kind of implying perhaps the parents just want their child to remain cute at the same age appearance-wise as a 6-year-old. So perhaps it's not just about convenience, it might be about cuteness, and they don't want a large burdensome special needs adult living in their home 40 years of age. They'd rather a cute 6-year-old. So that's the argument for that one. The author that wrote this had a child with special needs very similar to Ashley. She's now, the daughter is now 40 years old, and the author is writing it from kind of the point of view if at her daughter's age of 6, when her daughter was 6, if someone had presented her with this information about the Ashley treatment, would she have considered it for her own daughter? Now, she says now, knowing what she knows now, she never would have. However, she sincerely hopes or wishes that if she had been in that position, contemplating it, she hopes someone would have been there to tell her what she is telling others. So she's trying to be that voice discouraging other parents from having these treatments done to their child. Because she goes on to say that, her daughter didn't have the treatment done and is a full-grown woman at 40, and although she does not possess many skills in terms of motor skills or communication, she has ability to express emotion and compassion and kind of helps people experience things through her, such as enjoyment for the small things of life. So what she's kind of implying is that although they didn't know how her daughter was going to turn out, they didn't need to change anything about her to still make her be, a positive contribution to society, even though she was perhaps bigger and more burdensome than the 6-year-old, as she was still able to, bring joy to others and things like that. So those are kind of ethical arguments for and against the Ashley treatment, just kind of general arguments. There are arguments that can be taken from a Christian worldview perspective. For example, there's a lot of verses in the Old Testament. A lot of them are used to kind of advocate for anti-abortion and the rights of the child, rights of the unborn, and things like infanticide. But some of them can be applied to this type of situation as well in this context. One I picked out particularly that alludes to disabilities is Exodus 4 verse 11, which says, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf, or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord?" And of course here it's just saying that, God is the one who has specifically made disabilities and has made people, the way they are. And if you are coming from, a Christian background, it's likely your belief that everyone's made in God's image or with God's intentions and how, beautifully and wonderfully made. So to go and change a disability like that, especially on an aesthetics level, is kind of insulting in a way, as that's how they are supposed to be made and they do not need to be changed. So that's kind of, there are various arguments that you can make coming from a Christian worldview perspective. That's just one example of one verse that you could use for your argument. Me personally, I side with the viewpoint of the woman who wrote this article. I would not be an advocate of the Ashley treatment. And I agree with all of her points in regards to Ashley's quality of life being important, not just her parents. And other things she raised concerns over, such as the removal of the sex organs, whether or not that was effective, or in terms of what the goal was supposed to be, or perhaps it was just a convenience thing that was done. Now, there are several arguments out there made by many people for Ashley treatment. For example, Ashley's parents do have a fairly popular blog where they talk about their story and they interact with other people who are contemplating it for their own children. If you ever want to check that out, I could probably link it down below or in a comment. And that kind of raises a lot of other, perhaps, moral concerns that people have in terms of advocating it. So I, as I said, am not an advocate for it, but if you perhaps got from this video anything that anything you heard that you think would sway you in the opinion that you would advocate for it, there's certainly a lot that you can look at in terms of that, a lot of agreeing factors, as well as there are those who disagree. So you can just kind of contribute your opinion to it, whether or not you think this is an ethical procedure, whether or not you think it's not, and what about it do you believe is unethical? What about it do you believe is ethical? And perhaps what your grounds are. Are you coming from a Christian worldview perspective that you're saying that, or are you just perhaps coming from it a human rights advocate? So those are all important things to consider, and I hope to see some feedback on it. It's an important issue to myself, and I find it quite interesting, and I like to see what people have to think about it. So feel free to comment your opinion, and I'll interact with you. Thanks.